welcome to the CEO series. Our guest today is Evelyn Lee, career coach, certified career coach. Our topic is navigating career change, how to adapt to changes in your post-pandemic career, if there is such a thing. Evelyn has 18 years of experience spanning across talent acquisition, talent management, and HR operations. Among her achievements, she has led talent acquisition strategy, orchestrated global talent methodology and approach through co-developing talent and performance strategies to drive cultural and mindset shifts across an organization of approximately 3,500 employees. She is a certified career coach, guiding individuals and helping them navigate through challenges in their career journey. So with that, welcome, Evelyn. How are you?
Hey, hi Ron. Thanks for having me today. Hi everyone. Really excited to be here today, actually. It's been a while since, we worked together. So thanks for having me.
Yes, glad you agreed to come on the show. I think what you do is very important today because so many people's careers have been disrupted and they're trying as much as they possibly can to get back on track. So I think this conversation today will help a lot of people, and we'll give your information out at the back end so that if people need to contact you or follow up on some information. So I'd like to start it off by asking a question around managing career post-COVID. Can you give us a few takeaways for people to get their careers back on track if they have been disrupted?
Yeah, of course. I think, to be honest, it's actually quite a uncertain times and unprecedented times now, especially with COVID that kicks in. And I can really appreciate those people who have been impacted because of this pandemic. And my kind of key takeaways, right, with regards to the post-pandemic, it's going to be more probably optimistic than most people would think, because in general, I'm pretty optimistic, positive about what pans out. So I actually have 3 key takeaways to share. My personal opinion. I see, number 1, this situation as a reset to be it whether it's our lives or our careers. And we hardly have this opportunity, right, to kind of pause, reset, rethink, and it's a great reflection point for us. And this is the time where, you will take the step back away from that party, away from the noise that you were actually in previously. Because as I said, in your lifetime, you hardly have this opportunity to do so. And this pandemic really allows us to take that pause there. So that's one, that reflection is really important. The second thing that I really want to share is about making the best use of the current situation. Now, a lot of my clients who have spoken to me, they tend to wallow in the current situation. They are really in a denial state, and they are just simply lost. Like, what should I do now? I've got pay cuts, I'm on furlough, I've been retrenched, right? So what should I do? My answer is to make the best use of the situation and be in control of it. So take, for example, right, if you have been on reduced work hours because of the current pandemic, then think about what you could do, right, in those hours that you weren't working. So for example, you were on a 5-day work week to a 3-day work week. What is the additional 2 days that you are doing with, how are you maximizing your time there, right? Because these is things that you can actually be in control of. If you are being, on furlough, same thing, what are those additional hours going to be, how is it going to be spent? So, and if you unfortunately have, lost your kind of career, then I think it's a time that you think about what you really want to do as your next role. And that would bring me to the third point, which is understanding of yourself. So I spoke about, one, which is really the reset, a reflection point for all of us. 2, making the best use of your current situation right now. And number 3, I think a lot of us have underestimated how much or how important it is to understand yourself as an individual. So what are your purpose? What are some of your passion? What are your strengths? Because we seems to be, like in a, I always talk about, like a mouse on a wheel, where we keep running, like we keep, going, and we say, yeah, that's what, life is, wake up at 9, ends at 8 p.m. every day. But what are you really passionate about? And why is this so important? Because if you actually take that step back and think about what your purpose and passion and strength are, then you will have a more sustainable interest and attention to certain things that you want to work on, right? You will have a more sustainable pursuit in whatever that you are going to do. And this is a time where, if you happen to be, in this whole journey being disrupted, it's a time to kind of think about what you really want to do. Do you want to go back to the same old, or can you do something different at this point? So those are I would say, in short and in summary, it's those 3 areas, right? Really reset, rethink, reflect, and also make the best use of the current situation. Do not feel too pessimistic about it. And the third thing is really to understand, listen to yourself, like deep down. What are you really passionate about? What do you really want to do differently this time? It's like your second chance in life, right? So what do you want to do differently?
When you said that about the treadmill, you used that metaphor about the treadmill. What I thought about was that all of our lives were basically on autopilot. And we were just kind of going through the normal motions, getting up same time, doing what we had to do. And all of a sudden, everything was disrupted. And it's kind of like trying to put the puzzle back together again. And how do you do that? So you mentioned self-reflection. Lots of times people aren't good at that because they may feel that they're here and now they're thinking something totally different. How can a person self-reflect and be honest about self-reflection?
Yeah, I think the 2 main important questions to ask is, just looking in your past kind of career or life experience, right? And I always do this exercise with my client as well. Identify your high and your low points in your career or in your life, right? With that high points in your life, think about what is that situation, what is that skills and knowledge that have actually propel you and actually help you to be at that pinnacle, right? And when you reflect on your low points, with the same token, think about what are some of the environment you were in, right? What were some of those environments that has pulled you down or has made you less successful? And reflect on those areas, right? And that would really help you in your next role or in your next step to kind of steer away from those areas and be more focused on environments or in situations that will bring out the best in you. So really just kind of reflect high and low points in your career or life journey. And the last question, once you have got your high and low points, ask yourself, how would you want to do differently this time, right? What is that one thing, put pen down and action. A lot of us is, we do a lot of self-reflection, we do a lot of thinking, but we hardly take that one step, we hardly take that one action. So pen it down and say, right, so this is that one thing that I want to do differently in my next role, in my next step, and commit to it, right? Give yourself a timeline. When do you want to take that action? What kind of results do you want to see with that action? So then you could actually, do that self-reflection and plan forward rather than keep looking back and, and be sad and, unhappy about what was in the past. Yeah.
Looking back to the rear view mirror. So if we were to go through the process of self-reflection, trying to understand high points, low points, how can we translate that down to, say, our CV? Because people, again, have been on autopilot. They may have not been updating it, and it's kind of like an old document. How will this self-reflection process filter into CV enhancement?
Yeah, I think good point there. I mean, the reflection, the self-reflection and the understanding of yourself as an individual is really important in making sure that you have gone through that thought process of understanding yourself a lot more better before you actually, translate it into a resume. Now, in the form of resume, obviously that's for the purpose of making sure that you get the opportunity to be interviewed, right? So if you have that mindset of a recruiter, what you want to see is that relevance of the resume of the individual to the role that as a recruiter I'm hiring for, or a line manager I'm hiring for. So there needs to be a lot of relevance there, right? So obviously there's two parts to it. So one is on your own self-reflection. The second part is about how relevant are your skill sets and your knowledge to the company or the role that you're applying to. And that's the CV that you need to prepare. So with that, right, I would say that there's no one size fits all. Let's say, I've got a CV, I've created one CV and I send it to 10 different companies. And that's the usual way, right? People does it, it's out of convenience. But for me, personally, I would tailor it. I would tailor based on what the company is looking for in terms of the kind of culture that they present, in terms of the role, skill sets, and knowledge, right? So I'm not asking everyone to lie here, but obviously to prioritize what is relevant for the organization. So still continue to be, remain truthful at all times. That's important. So a few tips just on CV, right? Is keep it concise. 1 to 2 pages is good, right? Because a recruiter only spends, if you Google, they say 6 seconds on a resume.
Glance it.
So keep it concise, keep it relevant. If you feel that, the organization is looking for an individual that is highly creative, highly innovative, spell that out, giving some key pointers around your achievements in your previous work places, that you actually have demonstrated innovation or creativity, right? So speak to what the employer or the potential employer is looking for in your CV, right? And you also want to spell out the key skill sets and knowledge. So a lot of us is, we just kind of narrate the work experiences, but without having, without highlighting what are some of the key competencies. So I would create a segment, just to highlight the key competencies that you possess as an individual, that will help, the recruiter to zoom into that segment and say, oh, okay, you do actually have those skills and knowledge to begin with. And last but not least, right, I think a lot of people has overlooked this, is a personal branding statement, right? Who are you as an individual, right? Are you okay, so usually I will say like, I'm an experienced HR leader, especially in talent management, talent acquisition, and I'm really passionate about creating sustainable HR solutions for businesses, right? Okay. So you actually have to have that one personal brand statement that speaks to the potential employer to just summarize who you are, just like an elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch, yeah. One of the things you mentioned, and as you were talking through that, about people applying for jobs, but being precise as to where they were applying. Because this past week, I've received 3 sets of CVs. I received one from someone who sold aluminum. I received another from someone who was a landscape architect. Right. And I received one other from someone who was in mining, has nothing to do with what I do. And I think lots of times people just send out information.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is should be targeted.
Yeah.
I should be surgical in my approach as opposed to just blasting it out.
Exactly. you must be sitting in the other person's shoes, right? To think about what the recruiter or the line manager is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be, as accurate as you can, there's a few ways that you can do it, right? I mean, internet is a good source of information there, right? And number two, LinkedIn. You've got loads of information about the recruiter, about the line manager. You could look at the career history of the individual. And that's equally important to kind of do your research beforehand. And the third thing I would say, if you do have friends or, family, relatives that works in that company that you are going to apply for, just tap on their shoulders and say, hey, can you actually share a little bit more about the company culture? Do you know this line manager? And that would give you a lot more accurate in terms of the information that you are seeking, right? So you can actually easily tap on your network. So network is really important in this day and age, especially post-pandemic.
So we've got that. We've got this CV side. That's one piece of the structure. Let's talk about LinkedIn, because lots of times our LinkedIn profile is kind of like reading a tombstone. We worked for a company, started this date, ended this date, but I have no idea as to what you did while you were there. Mismanaged.
Yeah.
And you mentioned brand, so that all ties into the branding concept too, right?
Exactly, correct. So the social media footprint is getting increasingly important, and you need to sync in with what you have presented from a resume perspective as well. So people like recruiters, they will kind of go online and Google, right? And they will get to see your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and whatnot. And you want to make sure that all your social media presence actually has this coherence to who you are as an individual, right? So I mean, take a funny example would be in the past experience. I kind of looked someone up, and everything was so professionally done until you get to see the Facebook page where all the party pictures, right, gets showed up. So you need to make sure that there is some coherence across all your profiles, and that's the very basic thing that you need to do or to begin with.
Yeah, which one is real, right? Is the Facebook real or is the LinkedIn branding real? Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, you can't afford to have just one thing to derail the entire kind of process that you are going through. So and that's important. Now coming back to LinkedIn, I don't think that it's very dissimilar from CV perspective, but obviously a personal branding is really important. Right. Everything that I spoke about with regards to CV, that goes into the LinkedIn as well. Like, having a great personal brand, having a, professional profile picture, and so on and so forth. And, putting on your key achievements there. But what I want to talk about is how can you use LinkedIn as a tool to help you with your job search a lot more, right? Because that's an area where you can actually, first of all, connect with people that maybe it's a second or a third degree, right, through your first degree network. And that's very powerful. So imagine you want to apply to a company that you have no idea, at all, but someone there as a first degree, right? So you can always actually just kind of network with that individual and say, hey, I'm actually looking for this role. Can you connect me with so and so, right? Because through LinkedIn, you know who is connected with who. And that's where you can actually continue to expand on your network, continue to look for a kind of potential role via the LinkedIn network. So that's a very powerful tool that you can actually leverage on. And apart from that, obviously, you could look at, LinkedIn jobs online that would give you some information about the role. The LinkedIn companies, so on LinkedIn itself, you can also Google up the company itself. Usually right now, in today's day and age, again, the companies usually showcase their own company culture via video on LinkedIn. So you can actually get a good sense of what the company is on LinkedIn as well. So this is one of the way, right, that you can actually continue to network virtually via LinkedIn. And a lot of people underestimated the importance of this tool.
Yeah. Well, I've always said that LinkedIn is your personal billboard to the world, professional world. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I've always told people that if you worked on a project and the project was successful, make create a concise statement around that and put it in your little success profile under that job, because you'll see sometimes it's, as I said, start date, end date, my title, and that was it. Nothing was
Yeah.
captured, so I don't get a sense of what happens there. So we go through CV. CV is cool. We get the LinkedIn profile, cool. All of a sudden, we get the call, and we have the interview coming up. So how do
Right.
we? And matter of fact, you did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on
I did.
Ace the interview, which was awesome.
Yeah.
We'll put a link to that, in
Awesome.
the edited version of that. So we
Yeah.
get the call. Now we're excited, and now we have to do a virtual interview for the
Yeah.
first
Exactly.
screen. What do we do besides our heart beating like this?
Okay, I would say that the preparation is as important as the interview skills itself, right? Again, a lot of us just overlook the fact that, hey, when you get a call for an interview, you just need to make sure that you are 101% prepared for the interview. So I'm just going to spend a couple of, just top tips on what you need to do as part of the preparation. And I also capture that in my ACE interview
Ace the interview,
webinar.
yeah.
Exactly. So I would just kind of look at three things, right? One is research, right? I mentioned earlier about researching about the organization, right? But what exactly do you research? You need to find out more about, how the company is set up, like what are some of the different functions within the organization? What is the vision, mission, kind of purpose of the organization, the culture? And also research on the recruiter, right? The recruiter and the line manager, who are they on LinkedIn? Just so that you actually have the background information. And last but not least, look at the role, right? Research on the role. If you know of someone who is in the organization, kind of find out a little bit more about what that role entails. What are some of the top, priorities for that role that you are going for? So research, I've got three main areas. So the company, the recruiter, the line manager, as well as the role itself. Because this would give you a good sense of what you're going for. And that will also help you to prepare, not just for the interview, but also prepare your questions for your interviewer. All right. So those are the things that you will need to make sure, right? That you are 101% prepared for the session. And the next part to this in terms of research is to practice it. Because a lot of times we felt that, hey, we just go into the interview, we go with the flow.
Wing it.
But you will be surprised that you go in there, you will be caught by surprise by some of the questions that are actually going to blow you away, in the sense that you are not even, aware that this question is going to be posed during the interview. So practice it together with, a friend of yours, a peer, or even with a career coach, to make sure you kind of master it. It becomes second nature to you, right? When you actually run through the questions during the interview. And and the third part is really just be mentally prepared, be professional about how you're going to prepare for that day, and be early for the interview, or be on time right now if you're doing it virtually, right? So really make sure you do the research, you practice, and mentally prepared for the interview.
Okay.
Now, during the interview itself, right, I'm just going to cut it, the long story short, because I've captured a lot of these key questions that will be asked during the interview. But I'm going to split it out into probably, three different buckets of interview questions, right? So the first question is all about asking about you as an individual. So this is about your background, your experience. Typically, people will ask, tell me about yourself, right? And a lot of people, depending on where you are in different parts of the world, if you are especially, sometimes not very, you are not, kind of used to going into interview, you might not be actually sure what to share when the interviewer asks, tell me about yourself, right? And what I would normally do is talk a little bit at a high summary level of your personal self as well as your professional self, right? And again, whatever that you have researched about the organization will come in really useful at this point. Because if the company is looking for a salesperson, for example, right, then you need to think about what are some of the attributes of a salesperson or marketing person, right? So then you need to speak to that. Okay, if you are a very introverted person, you might want to make sure you position your personal self to talk a little bit more about what are more of your attributes that will be more in line as a salesperson, right? So for example, if you are just someone in reality, stay home, like to watch Netflix, on a couch, but you are going for a sales role, so you might want to share something that is more aligned to what you're going for. So yes, that is true, that is that part of you, but you could also share that, hey, I love travel, I love to watch travel documentaries and things like that, because that would brings out the other side of you that is more relevant for the role that you are going for. So it goes hand in hand. Your research and how you're going to position yourself, that takes a lot for you to make sure that you practice it. You only share the part that is still you, but is more relevant to the role that you're applying for, right? Yeah. Likewise, for the professional side, also to speak to, if you're going for a sales role, what are some of the, again, elevator pitch, right? Your so-called 15 or 1 minute of a pitch of yourself, your key achievements in those areas, and just make it really succinct at the introduction, right? Of tell me about yourself before you actually dive into the details. And I'm sure the recruiter or the line manager will actually dive into details later.
Yeah.
So
okay.
that's kind of the background. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've done that, and then the interviewer or the hiring manager will come back and say, well, do you have questions for me? Now, having sat on the other side and interviewed people, I'm always incredulous as to the questions they ask or don't ask, which I may read something into. You don't really want this because you can't even come up with a decent question. So give us some advice on how we should formulate 2 or 3 questions to ask at the end of the interview.
Yeah. I will kind of flip this a little bit around, all right? I will start with the no-nos, right? I will start with the don'ts, because it's it's hilarious when I actually hear people start asking sensitive questions like, how much are you going to pay me? What is my salary for this role, right? Those are the no-nos, because it actually, you are still at a very early stage of the interview. Even when you are actually at the end of the whole interview, right, you will wait for the interviewer to actually pop this question rather than you actually talk about this. Because whatever that you are going to talk in this interview session, you need to be positioning yourself that you are going to value add, right? You are going to offer your skills and knowledge for this organization. So what are some of the great questions to ask, all right? It's all about, again, your research about the organization. And you want to be asking intelligent questions, right? What do I mean by intelligent questions? So don't go in and say, hey, can you tell me more about your company vision, right? Or mission, especially if these are all spelled out on the internet already, you Google it. So do not ask questions like that, right? So go straight in and say, okay, if you want to ask an intelligent question, but still pertaining to vision, mission, you could say, okay, so-and-so, I actually understood your vision is this. And can you help me to understand a little bit more, what do you guys do to kind of bring this to life, right? So at least that gives people an understanding that, okay, you have read up, you just want to clarify, you want to see how this company is performing, how this company is actually bringing this to life. And that makes a lot of sense, because by you understanding how the company is going to pursue this, it helps you as an individual, as an applicant, to see whether there's a good fit, right, for you to go for this company as well. So it's not just they selecting you, but you also need to make sure that you make the full use of this session to understand whether you like this organization enough to move to the next step with them. Right?
Okay.
So intelligent questions like that, if you have done the research upfront, ask questions like that. The other question I really like to ask, right, is about the interviewer. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can find out about the interviewer on LinkedIn, right, the career history. One thing to find out about the culture of the organization, and especially if I see the interviewer has been in the organization for a reasonable amount of time, let's say 5 years and more, then you could say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, tell me, what keeps you in this role with this organization for the last 5 years, right? Again, it tells them that, hey, you have actually looked me up on LinkedIn, you have understood my profile, and now you want to understand the culture, right, of the organization. And that speaks to the culture, why the person actually stay on for 5-6 years. I mean, there must be a reason for that. And then again, when you actually listen to these reasons, you will have to start thinking about whether these experiences or the culture that the interviewer is narrating, whether that resonates with you, and whether that's good enough for you to move on to the next stage with them.
Okay.
So I think those are very powerful questions there. And if you are going for a change management kind of role, like you are going in as a leadership role, you are going to implement some changes or inculcate some shifts in mindset, then you might want to think about what's the organization readiness to embrace change. How is that demonstrated across the culture? So there's a lot of great questions, to be honest, out there, but try to ask intelligent questions based on the research that you have done, rather than go in with a straight question, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
That you didn't give thought to, something that just popped in. So
Exactly.
basically what you're saying is that you want to create those questions ahead of time. And that in that so-called practice session, you could practice on how you're going to, follow up with those questions. But the other point is that on your, going back to the webinar that you did the other day on Ace the Interview, like you covered a lot of these points. Are there any other points that you would cover from the topic of acing the interview?
I would say that, in terms of acing the interview, there is a structure that I mean, it's actually quite a well-known structure, like, STAR interview model.
Okay.
And that model actually helps you to structure your questions, right? I mean, STAR as in situation, task, action, and results. Because you can be very prepared for the interview, but you cannot preempt the questions that will be asked.
Yeah.
So what model that needs to run through in your mind is that STAR interview model, because it sets you in that right structure to narrate your experiences, right? Start with what situation you are in, what is that task that you are being given, what is the action that you have taken, right, in relation to the task, and then what's the outcome of it, which is the result. And I've also created like a one-pager to help with some prompters, with some examples. That's actually part of the free resources that we'll be sharing later. So it's a one-pager, right? Take that and just look at how, I kind of structure some of the examples and use some of the examples with regards to this model. That would be so-called your go-to mental model when you are stuck or you are being presented with a very brand new interview question.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
For organizations who are maybe pondering layoffs, I know that back in my New York days, we had to go through mass layoffs, and we brought in career coaches to handle that process. And if I'm in an organization, I'm thinking maybe cost is a factor, and I'm just going to lay people off. What advice would you give to a C-suite about offering career coaches for a certain level? The advantages of doing it, disadvantages, or?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, just to take a step back there, right? I mean, statistics have shown that, you know, a kind of rehiring or onboarding a new employee is about 13%, 13% of someone's salary. So that's a high number, right? And why do I state this? Because before we go to the last resort of laying off, I think we do have other options as well. I mean, speaking to a C-suite leader, right? That are we looking at all the other potential solutions, such as, you know, making sure that we redesign some of the roles, we repurpose roles before we actually lay off. Have we considered reduced work hours? Have we considered furloughs? You know, these are pockets of opportunities where we could still retain great talent, but managing costs, right? Why I put it that way? Because I mentioned earlier that if someone is being impacted, like being on reduced work hours or even on furlough, they could maximize the time elsewhere to upskill, right? Or even to learn something different. And that eventually would still benefit the organization. So my advice here is to think twice about laying off, but thinking about other potential solutions before laying off. Now, obviously, the career coaches would then come in, and that's a very important, I would say, support community for the employees who are being impacted, right? Because you need to think about career transitioning, not just outside of the organization. So for example, layoffs would be outside of the organization, but you will also potentially need career coaches to transit within the organization, right? So in the case of, if let's say you have decided as an organization to redesign some of the roles and repurpose the roles, you want to move someone from HR to maybe, for example, I don't know, sales role, right? So is this person able to transit into that? If a high potential HR into a sales role or vice versa, how are you going to do it, right? Then the career coach would come into play and actually help the individual to understand where those strengths are and development areas are, what is the journey to go from A to B to make it successful, right? So I would say career coaches definitely would come in, you know, even during an in-house reorg exercise, as well as those who are being laid off and who needed more of a support after the layoff and needed some help to seek opportunities externally. So it works, you know, in different facades, like different ways to actually bring in the career coaches like myself, to transit, especially during this very unprecedented times.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've gone through, you know, the CVs, LinkedIn. We got the interview. We aced the interview. We got the job. What should we take away from managing your career post the most massive disruption ever? And as you said in the beginning, you know, like people were kind of on autopilot, never giving much thought to that. So what would you say are key learnings that people should take away from this once you get back on track and putting my career more of a laser focus?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say that, you know, for those who still have a job during this day and age, first of all, you need to be really grateful, all right? Because why do I put that up front, right? Because I've got clients who actually have a role, but is super unhappy about it, right? So I'm also speaking to this population at this point because they felt that they are in the job because for the sake of doing it, right? There's no choice. But I would say that if you have a job these days, be grateful about it, right? Some people are more badly impacted than you are. And as I mentioned earlier, make the best use of the current situation, right? Continue to have that learning mindset, right? One of my clients actually spoke to me and said, hey, Evelyn, I'm actually, yes, I have a role, but because of the current COVID situation, my company has downsized and I'm doing double job, I'm actually having to cover here and there, but to me, how are you going to see this? It's really up to you. It's in your gift, right? Whether you see this as an additional job or you see it as an opportunity to learn something new, or you see it as an opportunity to network with a different department or network with different stakeholders. Because don't forget, everything that you touches at this point in time, actually you could turn it into an opportunity, and it's really up to you. All right. So it's your own mindset at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you need to keep telling yourself, whatever that you're doing right now, it's for the benefit of the future. Are you accumulating the additional knowledge, skill sets that you will need in the future? And you know what? At this point, your boss might be, walking up to you and say, hey, I've got this new project, but we really do not have someone to do it. Is that something that you want to pick up? Because now is the opportunity, right? In the past, you may have a lot of, other colleagues who will actually raise their hand and say they want to go for this project, but now you have less competition and you may be able to get that project. You will have your visibility, and that would help you to plan for your next role, right? So in kind of a summary there, right? A lot of people feels that their career path is straight line.
Yeah.
I want to go from a manager to a director to a VP, and then if not, I'm not going to take that task. If not, I'm not going to do that work. It's additional work. But think of it as a lateral, as a holistic. It's a build up, right? Of your skill sets and accumulation of your skills and knowledge, and that would put you in a very good state, right? When the opportunity knocks on your door, that's where, I've got it all. I've accumulated all the skill sets based on, during COVID times, I managed to do more. I managed to learn more, right? So do not be too fixated. So really be adaptable in today's day and age. I think that's the main word that I want to offer to everyone, right? In this VUCA world that we're living in, be really adaptable to those changes. See things as opportunity as it comes, rather than feels that you are doing more and there's no choice. Actually, everyone has a choice, right? So that's my so-called 2 cents worth of advice there, based on what my client have shared with me. So I hope that is actually very useful for everyone who's listening at this point as well.
I took a few notes. Positive mindset. So I see challenge here, flip it as an opportunity. I see rethink career ladder, and think maybe career lattice could be horizontal, and you can still get to wherever you need to go. And the other, I wanted to come back to for a question, learning, consistently learning. So if I look at the challenge to an opportunity, I'm learning something new. And I take this back to me since February. My last business trip was Bangkok. And I got back to Dubai, and within a week, the airport had closed. So I just made it back in. So I started reading more. I started following up on research papers that I had stacked up. And I just put myself kind of on this learning journey. That works for me. Could you, because you mentioned learning going forward. What do I learn from this, and how can I learn to be better at what I do?
Yeah, so I mean, I let me just cite an example from a client again, right? I mean, like I mentioned earlier, one of the client did actually kind of complain to me that he's actually doing double job right now, right? So to me, I think it's very simple in terms of just understanding what you are in at the moment and planning what you want to do in the future. So this is I would say, the most most critical period, I would say most important period where you could actually think about what are some of the things that you want to learn. Like, for example, if you are given 2 jobs instead of 1, see the benefit of doing the other job at the same so-called price tag, which is your salary that you're drawing. What is the benefit? What can you get out of it, right? What is in it for you that will help you to build a more holistic experience? And in this client's case, right, he is actually more of a back-end role, and he felt that his boss has given him a little bit of a front-end role to deal with the customers, right? So for him, he felt that, hey, now I have to do end-to-end. But the learning mindset should be, now that I'm more exposed to managing like customers, which I never had that experience before, right? I never had that learning before. How am I going to sharpen my stakeholder management skill sets, my communication skill sets, my presentation skill sets? Because all he does in the past was more administrative, was more programming, was more coding, right? But now he's being exposed to the other side. And that's a very steep learning curve, right? And that's additional work, yes, but what he gets out of it, I would say it's really nuggets of gold there, because you wouldn't actually have this opportunity if not for the current COVID situation, because they have to get someone, I mean, they have to reduce the head count there, and therefore kind of put it into his space. So obviously it comes to a point where, I mean, the later part of the conversation is how you're going to balance the priorities, right? Because now that you've got more to do on your hand. But what I'm saying is eventually see that as a learning opportunity rather than, you know, as an additional workload that you are being given. Does that make sense? I mean,
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Positive versus negative, and you know, and going through what we're going through now, I suppose that's to stay sane. That's the only mindset you're going to have to kind of transition into. So as we come to a close, what are a few key takeaways? I know you've covered and given us so many nuggets of information.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to tell us in closing?
Yeah. In fact, I would say that during this period of time, I think the best thing is, you know, to be really, really open-minded about what you have in front of you and really stay positive as well. And to be honest, during this period of time, I did a lot of self-reflection as well. I mean, I did a lot of thinking myself, and you know, I've actually created a strategy for myself to kind of make sure that I continue to pull through during this difficult period, as per those who are listening out as well. And this strategy is called the MASK, like mask, right? So M is about me, right? I talk about how important it is to understand yourself as an individual, your passion, purpose, and strengths. That's me. And this kind of e-learning course that I've created actually has a lot of exercises that goes into it. It's a self-paced learning that you can tune in and find out a lot more about yourself. And A is about being adaptable, right? You have to adapt to the change. Change is constant. So how are you going to adapt to it, right? So a lot of some of the tools and mindset shifts are also being created in this strategy. And then before you actually jump onto S, which is go out and do your search in terms of what is out there, whether it's a role that you are going to apply to, or you want to start, you know, searching and, you know, being your own business, start your own business, being an entrepreneur. So that's also possible. And then K, which is the last strategy there, is actually kill it. Right, kill it means, you know, you have to start preparing for interviews. You have to make sure that you practice it, you aced it, right? So MASK, this strategy really has helped many of my clients, including myself when I first created it, to navigate through these challenges that they have in front of them, right? And and I think the bottom line is understand who you are as an individual. Like I said at the very beginning of this session, we are too caught up. We are too caught up with the day-to-day, right? So we need to pause. We need to understand who we are as an individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Evelyn Lee, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. We're going to put a link on the back end of the edited version, which goes back to your AC interview
Great.
webinar that you did the other day, and your contact information. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I'm really happy to be able to share with everyone on this session. So look forward to working with you again, Ron. And
Okay.
thanks, everyone.